चित्तस्य पदेन वाचा मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतुं प्रवरं मुनीना पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिं प्रणतोऽस्मि। Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So last satsang we had talked about Sutra number 15, where we started talking about Vairagya. How do we view Vairagya in our lives, especially as Grihasthas? How do we approach detachment? What does it mean? Does it mean giving up everything, giving up our desires, giving up our ambitions? Or, does it actually mean giving up our attachment to the results of the things that we pursue? So we had a beautiful discussion about that. Patanjali Maharishi basically is talking about Vairagya in twofold. So last class we spoke about what he refers to as a more gross level or lower level Vairagya. And today we're going to talk about Sutra number 16 that speaks of Vairagya at its highest form. Okay, so I'll read the sutra and then we'll go into it. Tat param purushakyate guna vaitrashnyam. Okay, so that is the sutra today. Tat means that, param, the highest, purushakyate, true knowledge of Purusha. Okay, guna vaitrashnyam is the freedom from the desire for gunas. So essentially the sutra saying that is the highest in which there is freedom from the desire for gunas on account of knowledge of Purusha. So the previous sutra talked about, freedom from our sense pleasures, right? Like things that we perceive through our sense objects, freedom from those. This one is taking it to the gunas, and very specifically so, right? So we just were talking a few minutes back about the three gunas, right? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. And as we go through our Tattva Bodh class, we're obviously going to go deeper into it. But gunas are basically the building blocks, if you will, of everything that is manifested. So everything that we see in our living world today, in our environment today, is Triguna. It's when you go beyond the three gunas, when you go beyond this gross world and into a state that is gunatit, that is the supreme consciousness, for example, gunatit, it doesn't necessarily involve the gunas. So what's interesting to me about the sutra is that this almost feels impossible, right? As long as we are all alive and here, we are Trigunatmak. So what does it mean to say that the highest form of freedom is to go beyond these three? How do we truly achieve that? To me, it is an interpretation that this path of Vairagya is a very difficult one that needs to be looked at minutely every single moment of our life. So we need to be watchful about all the traps that are in our life that pull us away from Vairagya, right? So the highest form where he talks about is one that goes beyond even the three gunas. So we'll break this down into one of, I've created a bit of a chart. I actually took it from the internet. I'll share it with Archana ji so we can put it on the thing here and I'll walk through it. We'll take a look at this through the lens of the 25 tattvas. So Sankhya philosophy, okay, there are these things called the tattvas that are broken down into 25 different elements, starting all the way from the unmanifest, the pure consciousness, Shiva, down to the tanmatras level. Okay, so we'll just walk through that and we'll tie it back to the sutra and what exactly we're trying to say. So if you look at this here, and I know it may not be clear on the video, but essentially it's a tree, and I'll walk through this in order and we'll review it. So when we think about evolution or creation, the first source of all of it is the Purusha, or the supreme consciousness, okay, which then gives rise to what is called Mula Prakriti, or the unmanifest Shakti. So at this stage is the first level of, the Shiva or the supreme consciousness actually giving rise to something else. So it's a type of philosophy. I mean, and I won't go too much into it, but yes, Sankhya philosophy is one that believes in this model, right, of causality and Purusha and Prakriti. So in that, the Purusha giving rise to Prakriti, which then gives rise to this thing called Mahat. Okay, Mahat being that supreme intellect, the source of everything that is then manifest into our world. Okay, so from Mahat arises this Ahankar, okay, which is the ego or the self-identity, which then through the three gunas, the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, gives rise to the mind, okay, which is the Manas, the five sense organs, Jnanendriyas, the eye, ear, nose, skin, tongue, which we talked about, the organs of action, Karmendriya, the five of them, hands, feet, speech, elimination, procreation, the five Tanmatras, so Shabda, Sparsha, Rasa, Rupa, and Gandha. So all of the five: sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. So these Tanmatras basically go through a process of combination and recombination, which give rise to the Pancha Mahabhutas, which is the ether, air, fire, water, earth. And these Pancha Mahabhutas then form the building blocks of the world that we see, right? Everything that's manifest. So the reason I wanted to walk through this structure is, if you look at it, the process of evolution, right, is starting from this thing called Purusha, or like this supreme consciousness, or that pure and unmanifest consciousness, all the way coming down to the building blocks of what we see in the world, which is the Tanmatras and the Panchamahabhutas. And Patanjali Maharishi in this sutra actually talks about going beyond the gunas. So the three gunas actually they start kind of in that, the Mahat Ahankar, like once the Mula Prakriti starts to manifest, that's where the three gunas start to combine together, which infuse, they're part of basically everything that you see. So it's almost like saying you go beyond the gunas. Okay, that is the highest form of Vairagya. So when we break it down into our practical day-to-day, right, which is the purpose of a lot of these, this tree starting from the Purusha to the Mahabhutas is the process of evolution. And if we look at where we are, where we operate, the we and the I, the Ahankar operates, it is at that gross level, right? So to get closer to the gunas, or to get more, or to get closer to the awareness of how gunas play into our life, you need to almost go through a process of involution. So you have evolution, which is from the inside to the out, and then you have the process of involution, which is going from the outside to the in, right? And the first, so the Sutra number 15, where we talked about Vairagya related to the gross elements, is more the process of the evolution and the outward sense of detachment using, with the sense objects. And this form of Vairagya is more on the subtler side, more on almost at the guna level, where it's saying not just having Vairagya towards the results of desires, but having Vairagya towards the concept of even enjoying these desires. That is the highest form. So we're not just saying, there is a way, there is a process in which, when we're building a practice of Vairagya, we look at something and we say, okay, I tend to get attached to sweets. Okay, and I'm going to put together in my life a system where I eat sweets only once a week. The rest of the days, I'm not going to even look at it, right? So you've put a kind of system in place where you're training yourself, you're training your mind to say, okay, I need to control sweets. So this is like a bit of a habit building, or like a battle almost every day till it starts to become a part of your life. But imagine the same you who realizes that eating sweets truly every day is not a good thing for you, right? So the knowledge that what something like eating sweets could do every day to you starts to take hold stronger than your habitual aspect of eating sweets every day. So then it's less a battle of, oh my God, I need to control myself, versus I am now informed that a certain habit of mine is actually not good for me. And I'm trying to align myself to the larger purpose of leading a healthy lifestyle. So that's why when we talk about, the antakarna, right? Man buddhi chitta hankar. We want to divinize that buddhi so that it can inform us, it can lead us to a life where we're anchoring not on, I need to control my, vairagya, or my attachments to, I now know the source of all this. I now have the knowledge of Purusha. So this stuff doesn't matter to me. This need to enjoy certain pleasures is not even on my radar, because I now have realized a much higher, bigger truth in my life that I can hold on to, and that is enough. So the Vairagya that is described in this sutra, go ahead, Pragya, you have a question?
But I think that is even one level higher than Vivek Janit Vairagya. Because I think Vivek Janit Vairagya is still stemming from the small I, some aspect of the small I, right? But you know how you said involution?
Yeah.
In my mind, I was thinking dissolution. It's like almost like once you cease to have that duality,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So at that stage, actually, I have a question. It's like, why would you do anything?
Yes. Yeah.
मतलब कुछ भी करने का मतलब क्या बनता है फिर? Desire का मतलब क्या है?
Exactly.
But we know that there are people who live at that stage.
Yeah.
And they do a lot.
So I mean, to me, asking the question कि उस desire का मतलब क्या है is a silly question to ask, because my mind is asking that question.
Correct.
It's still in the duality.
Correct.
Maybe the person who's at that stage will not even ask that question.
Correct.
They'll see things differently.
Yes.
But as a part of this sutra, he's telling us how to recognize it, but in terms of what that means.
Yeah.
Do we talk about? Are we going to touch on that?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So this sutra is basically distinguishing between the different, I would say, levels of vairagya, to put it, or if we extrapolate it, the different levels of evolution of, let's say, our spiritual self, right? There is a difference between reading about God and realizing God, the way I look at it, right? When you've realized God, none of the books matter. I don't need to read more books. I don't need to do anything. I've realized that supreme power. I don't need anything else. I don't need further validation. I don't need anything else. But in the process of seeking to understand what the supreme being is, I have to look at different sources. I'm going to read, I'm going to talk to people, I'm going to attend, lectures, whatever it is, I'm going to gain that knowledge. I'm still acting as in this duality that I am gaining something about, or from someone about this entity, that I am not yet this entity, or I am not yet a part of this entity, and we are not, integrated. But the minute it comes into you, that me and this entity are one, some of these practices don't matter even, right? Or don't even make sense, or you're not craving to do certain things. So then it almost flips the script to say that when you have the higher knowledge, or when you have the supreme knowledge of Purusha or God or universe or this higher being, when you anchor yourself to that, then the practice of Vairagya is different. It's even it's not just at the gross level, it's at the deeper levels of your existence, where even this need to seek certain pleasures go away, because until then Maya is going to pull you into these pleasures, and you're now playing the game of, oh god, I'm pulled in, but I want to stay on the path, and I'm going to do what it takes to not get lost, right? Like, we're still doing that because you pulled in, like, you can't help it, you're still seeing this thing as a force that's pulling you in beyond your own will and abilities, right? And you're trying to fight it. So that is the battle that's going on with that previous sutra, the lower vairagya. And we're recognizing that this stuff is not long lasting. This stuff, being attached, is only causing a vicious cycle. Okay, so that's step number one. But the highest form, through our sadhana, through introspection, through jnana, through bhakti, through karma yoga, whatever it is the realization that there is a much supreme power in existence that is around us, in us, that we need to tap into, where some of these battles actually don't even take place. It doesn't need to, because they're not something you even care about anymore. And you know that you're going to be anchored to that supreme soul or the supreme source of consciousness, right? So it is I think the big takeaway for us here is, as we think about all the things that we do on the gross parts of our life, on the grosser parts of our life, it's also important to recognize that the ultimate journey isn't inside to out, it's actually outside to in. You might be taking action on the outside first, but really the journey is more of involution than evolution, because when we talk about it in our worldly terms, we're always talking about evolution. Are you evolved? Are you evolved? Are you evolution? It's always from the inside out. But actually, this journey of introspection and jnana yoga and all of the things that we're reading and the sadhana that we're doing is actually a process of going back inwards, going closer to that consciousness, right? And I think, talking about this witnessing consciousness that we've touched on a few times, this little I and the bigger I, the more we are on this path, that distance between the small and the big starts to reduce. And the small merges within the big. And the more you do this practice and whatever it is that you're doing, how you identify changes. So today, if you're identifying with the smaller I, then as you go through your discipline, you start to identify with the witnessing consciousness. You almost have to create this witnessing consciousness as part of your sadhana to say, I am going to watch, I am going to witness, right? And a very important part of what we just talked about, right, with the tanmatras, when we do any kind of chanting or reading or satsang or practice, it actually has an impact on tanmatras. It changes how you perceive the world. The tanmatras are responsible for how we perceive information. Okay, so it's like we look at something, we perceive it a certain way, we feed that to the mind, which then brings about judgment or conclusion about something. We form a perception, right, and we act on it. But the more we purify or do sadhana or work on ourselves, on the deeper most aspects, it actually changes that tanmatra. So then
tanmatra is Sukshma Sharir.
Yeah. So that changes how you see the world. It changes how you respond to the very same events that are taking place in your life or have been taking place in your life for years. Events may not change, but how you perceive it, the role you play in it, changes. And that is actually where the magic happens, right? So the process of involution, it starts from there. And then it slowly percolates into the deeper, subtler beings of who you are. Till then, it's manifesting in what you do. It's almost like a two-way osmosis kind of thing, where as you work on the gross, you go back deeper inside into the subtler aspects of your being, which then impact how on the grosser side you are acting and behaving in the world and interacting in the world, in your relationships at work and all of that. So today's sutra, the big takeaway is that, while our day-to-day battles may be at what is called lower vairagya, or like the grosser levels of detachment, which is a very real battle, to be honest, right? Like in the lives that we lead, the ultimate impact of that is to go inward and to follow the process of involution to then impact the supreme level of vairagya, which Patanjali Maharishi is talking about, where you're even beyond the need for desires, not just beyond the desires themselves, even beyond the need for those. So again, how we get there, we talked about abhyasa, and all of that, and we'll see in the further sutras, we'll go deeper into some of it, but I'll pause here and see if there are any questions. The day-to-day battles, they happen at a very transactional level. I think when you say your loss, if I may ask, do you mean you are absorbed into it and you feel more connected to Shiva?
Yeah, always.
Yes, absolutely.
From childhood, because
Yeah.
the way my parents and especially my grandmother, great grandmother.
Each of us have a different path to what this, I'll call it the apex of the mountain is, right? You have such a connection with Lord Shiva. To be honest, I mean, I pray too, but I cannot understand it from your perspective. I understand it very differently. So I, for example, I'm more intellectually inclined, which means I need to read and understand something. And doing that as a real sadhana on its own generates a certain bhakti, right? Which you seem to have very naturally from the way you were brought up, etc. So whatever path you take, even if you're going through the path of bhakti, it will give you the right knowledge. It doesn't mean you need to know every word of the Shastra. Maybe it's one or two words that you come to know that create such a profound impact in your life that you feel so connected to that source that someone who's read all the grammar in the world doesn't, right? Or someone who's read all the Shastras in the world doesn't. There are so many people who are so deep in the knowledge of Shastras, scholars, but haven't realized God at the end of the day. Like, it's one thing to read about God or universe.
Dry knowledge.
Exactly. But how do you experience it? How do you realize it? How does it become real in your life? That is a different path for everyone. So, I think for you, just thinking about the way you connect, even in church, you're able to think about Shiva.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
That's enough.
I think,
You don't have to think beyond.
I went to Mount Kailash. I was doing
Wow.
a parikrama. Yeah, I did for those 4 days parikrama.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I walked to Mount
इसी में
Kailash.
मोक्षधाम आ गया
And
शिवा ने भेज दिया मोक्षधाम आपको बस उसका वो कल्मिनेशन हो गया अब यहाँ आ गया
ऐसे ही हो गया रास्ता. I just and I was number 1 in my list of people who we were all like 57 of us, because I stayed in Delhi for 15 days just to get that visa, because I decided I want to go, and I trained myself.
Not everybody can go.
Yeah, I was there.
आप छोड़ दीजिए सब कुछ ये सब शास्त्र मैं बता रही हूँ. संत कबीर का एक दोहा है, पोथी पढ़ी जगमुआ पंडित भया न कोई, ढाई आखर प्रेम का पढ़े सो पंडित हुए. सुना आपने? वो प्रेम आपके अंदर ऑलरेडी है भगवान के लिए, और क्या चाहिए? शिव शिव पुकारिए बस, और कुछ नहीं. यू डोंट नीड टू वरी अबाउट शास्त्र, ऑल ज्ञान आ जाएगा आपके पास. वो सब शास्त्र का अल्टीमेट यही होता है, वो प्रेम आना है प्रभु के लिए. दैट्स ऑल इट इज. वो जब प्रेम उतरेगा ना आपके अंदर, शास्त्र पढ़ने की कोई ज़रूरत ही नहीं है. यू डोंट नीड इट. दैट्स अ सीढ़ी. ऊपर चढ़ गए तो सीढ़ी की ज़रूरत थोड़ी ना होती. फिर ठीक है, स्टे देयर. नो, स्टे वेरेवर यू आर. यू डोंट हैव टू थिंक एनीथिंग एल्स. That's it. Stay there and hang on to it. Whatever feeling you're having, just what you have to do sadhana now is practice dwelling in that feeling all the time. वो आपको प्रैक्टिस करना है. जो आप फील किए थे कैलाश जाते समय या चर्च में बैठ के जो भी फीलिंग आता है ना आपके अंदर, ऐसा प्रे करिए कि मुझे वो फीलिंग हमेशा ना, गेट बैक टू दैट फीलिंग अगेन एंड अगेन एंड अगेन. दैट्स ऑल योर साधना विल बी. इट्स ईजी फॉर यू. God has cut the crap for you.
I have a picture.
वो एक्चुअली संस्कार होते हैं बचपन के भी, पेरेंट्स के भी,
Yes.
बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है, वो मैनिफेस्ट होते हैं जैसे धीरे धीरे, है ना, वो एक दिन ऐसे चेंज हो जाता है, तो इसीलिए इतना इम्पोर्टेंट है बच्चों पे वर्क करना,